In the ancient world, a fascinating drama was unfolding. On one side, the fiercely independent city-states of Greece, each cherishing its freedom. On the other, looming to the east, the vast and mighty Persian Empire. Between these two powers across the waters of the Aegean Sea, a dangerous tension was steadily growing. This very tension, this simmering conflict, would ultimately bring us to the legendary battlefield of Marathon. Today, we're taking a closer look at this famous battle. It all really began with what history calls the Ionian Revolt. Now, what was that exactly? Well, in Asia Minor, along the coast of modern-day Turkey, several Greek cities found themselves under Persian rule. Unwilling to remain subjects, they rose up in rebellion. And did Athens get involved? Yes, they did. Athens, along with one other city, Eretria, dispatched ships to support these Ionian rebels. They even marched inland and set fire to Sardis, the Persian provincial capital. You can imagine this was a direct and audacious challenge to the Persian king. Indeed, King Darius I was consumed by a furious anger and famously swore an oath that he would exact revenge, especially upon Athens. And so, the preparations for this retribution began. A grand military expedition was set in motion. We're talking about the year 490 BC. King Darius assembled an enormous naval fleet. How large, you might wonder? Estimates suggest around 600 ships carrying an army perhaps numbering close to 25,000 soldiers. And who were the commanders leading this formidable force? There were two, Datis and Artaphernes. Their first act was to attack Eretria, and they razed it to the ground, a clear punishment for having aided the Ionian rebellion. With Eretria dealt with, they pressed on, landing their forces on the coastal plain of Marathon, perilously close to Athens itself. For Athens, the news of 25,000 Persian soldiers on their doorstep must have sounded like an alarm bell, a dire warning. There was, understandably, great anxiety in the city. They immediately mustered their own forces. How many soldiers could Athens gather? They had about 10,000 of their citizen soldiers, known as hoplites. Joining them were 1,000 allied soldiers from the city of Plataea. These hoplites, they were quite a specific type of warrior, weren't they? Yes, they were. These hoplites were heavily armored, wielding spears and shields, and they fought in a distinctive formation called the phalanx. The phalanx, you could describe it as a dense wall of men, standing shoulder to shoulder, presenting a very strong, almost impenetrable defensive line. Now, alongside gathering their army, the Athenians did one more crucial thing. They sent a message to Sparta, pleading for assistance. Sparta, of course, was renowned throughout Greece for its exceptional military prowess. A messenger named Phidippides was dispatched, and he famously ran the entire distance to Sparta. So, did Sparta immediately come to Athens' aid? No, not immediately. While Sparta did promise to send help, they informed the Athenians that they were in the midst of a significant religious festival, and because of this religious observance, they explained, they couldn't send out their army until the festival concluded, which would take several more days. This meant that, at Marathon, Athens and their Plataean allies would have to face the Persian might alone. So, picture the scene on the battlefield. On one side, approximately 11,000 Greeks, predominantly these heavy infantry hoplites, and on the opposing side, around 25,000 Persians, who not only had superior numbers but also possessed cavalry and archers, advantages the Greeks lacked. This was a serious imbalance of power. What strategy then did the outnumbered Greeks adopt? Being fewer in number and without cavalry or archers, they strategically positioned themselves on higher ground at the foot of a hill. This was a clever move, designed to make it difficult for the Persian cavalry to launch an effective charge, offering them a measure of protection. And then, for several days, perhaps as many as 8, the two armies simply camped, facing each other. A tense standoff. 8 days? And no one made a move? It was a kind of stalemate. Meanwhile, back in Athens, the pressure was mounting. Some citizens began to argue for seeking a compromise rather than risking a battle. It's understandable, with such a formidable threat so close. So, what finally broke the deadlock and initiated the battle? Something must have happened. Indeed, this is where a crucial turning point occurred. One day, quite suddenly, the Greeks observed that the Persian cavalry was nowhere to be seen in the field. Vanished? Where could they have gone? This is a point of some debate among historians. Some suggest they might have moved off to find fodder for their horses or fresh water. Or was there another reason? A more widely accepted theory is that the Persian commanders had ordered the cavalry to re-embark onto their ships during the night. Onto the ships? But why? The likely strategy was a daring one: to sail around the coast and launch a surprise attack directly on the city of Athens itself, while the main Greek army was still pinned down at Marathon. That was a cunning plan indeed. However, one of the Athenian generals, Miltiades, was a very experienced commander. He immediately recognized the opportunity this presented. What opportunity was that? The absence of the Persian cavalry. Yes, Miltiades argued forcefully that without their cavalry, the Persian army was significantly less dangerous, and this was the perfect moment to attack. So they decided to break the stalemate and go on the offensive. Miltiades managed to persuade the other generals, and then they devised a specific battle plan. What was this plan? The strategy was to arrange the Greek line of battle so that its center was relatively weak, only a few ranks deep. A weak center? Doesn't that sound incredibly risky? It does, but the main strength, the bulk of their forces, was concentrated on the wings, or flanks. There, they formed much deeper ranks of soldiers. What was the advantage of such a formation? The objective was that when the fighting commenced, the strong Greek wings would quickly overwhelm and defeat the Persian flanks. Then, these victorious Greek wings would turn inwards, effectively enveloping and trapping the Persian center. It was a plan for encirclement, a very bold and audacious strategy. And so, the Greeks launched their attack. They moved out from their defensive positions and advanced towards the Persians. The distance between the two armies was about 1.5 miles. The Greeks began by marching, but for the final few hundred meters they broke into a run. Running in all that heavy armor? Yes, indeed. This was completely unexpected by the Persians. Perhaps the Greeks intended to quickly cross the zone where they would be most vulnerable to Persian archers. That must have been an incredible sight. What happened when the two forces collided? The impact was tremendous. The Greek phalanx crashed into the Persian lines with immense force. Initially, just as Miltiades had anticipated with his weaker center, the Persian center began to push back the thinner Greek line in the middle. So the Greek center did give way? Yes, but the decisive action was happening on the flanks. The strong Greek wings successfully crushed the Persian flanks opposing them. And then, did they turn inward as planned? Absolutely. They wheeled inwards and enveloped the Persian center, which had advanced and now found itself caught. So the Persian soldiers were trapped in the middle. Yes, they were caught in a terrible predicament, attacked from both sides. In this desperate situation, panic erupted within the Persian ranks. It was a rout, a complete and utter defeat. The Persians broke and fled towards their ships, with the Greeks in hot pursuit. The fighting continued right down to the shoreline. And the Persian losses, they were substantial. It's estimated that around 6,400 Persian soldiers were killed. And what about the Greeks? Their casualties were remarkably light in comparison. Perhaps around 200, maybe 203 men. Such a vast difference. Yes, the superior weaponry, the heavy armor of the hoplites, and the disciplined organization of the phalanx played a huge role in this outcome. But you mentioned earlier that the Persian cavalry might have been heading towards Athens, so the story isn't quite over. No, not at all. The danger had not entirely passed. As soon as the battle was won, a new threat emerged. The possibility that the Persian fleet, now with its cavalry, Zhongshan embarked, might sail directly to Athens and find the city undefended. So what measures were taken then? This is where the famous story of Phidippides comes in. It's said that the same messenger, or perhaps another, ran all the way from Marathon to Athens. That's about 42 kilometers, isn't it? Yes, roughly the distance of the modern marathon race. He ran to deliver the news of the victory and, crucially, to warn the city that the Persian fleet was approaching. And the Athenian army? Immediately after the battle, despite their exhaustion, the Athenian army marched through the entire night, even though they were weary from fighting. Yes, they arrived back at Athens by early morning. So, when the Persian fleet eventually reached Phaleron, the port near Athens, they saw the Athenian army, arrayed and ready to defend their city. The very same soldiers who had just fought and won at Marathon were now there, prepared to protect their homes. Seeing this, the Persians abandoned any intention of attacking and set sail, heading back towards Asia. Wow, that was like 2 victories in a single day. They won the battle and saved their city. Yes, it was an incredibly decisive day for Athens. So, what was the true significance of this battle? For Greece, and particularly for Athens, it was immensely important. First and foremost, it massively boosted the morale of the Greeks. It proved that the seemingly invincible Persian Empire could, in fact, be defeated. And what became of Athens? Its prestige and influence soared. Athens emerged as a major power in the Greek world. This victory also laid the foundation for future Greek resistance against the Persians, setting the stage for famous encounters like Thermopylae and Salamis. And when did the Spartans finally arrive? They reached Marathon after their festival had concluded. By then, the battle was long over. They inspected the battlefield, saw the Persian dead, and were reportedly astonished at what the Athenians had accomplished. It truly was an amazing and historic victory, undoubtedly, but there's a point worth considering here. Historians also raise the question, was Marathon truly as decisive a battle as it's often portrayed? What do they mean by that? Well, they ponder whether it genuinely saved Western civilization, as is sometimes claimed, or if perhaps later on, when Athens was building its own empire, they might have exaggerated the importance of this particular battle to enhance their own prestige and historical narrative. That's another perspective. Yes, history is often written by the victors, so it's always valuable to try and examine events from multiple angles. However, there's no denying that Marathon was a truly glorious moment for the Greeks.